Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're taking it easy with a super chill watercolor doodle. For this project, you're going to need some watercolor paper. I use 140 pound. It's heavy enough to hold the amount of water we're going to be using today. You'll also want a watercolor brush or two. Any kind will do, whatever you like. I'm also using some washi tape today to hold down my paper. That's very helpful. And then, of course, you're going to want a nice watercolor palette. And for the doodles, you're going to want to have an artist pen of some type. Okay, so the point of this whole project is just to play. So for the first part of the video, we're going to be laying down color patches, and we'll talk about some of the different techniques you can play with. And then, of course, we will get into some doodling, which is basically a brainstorm for ideas if you're looking for some, and then a free-for-all. So the point today is to have fun, so kick back, relax, and let's get started. Okay, so for this first patch, I'm doing a technique called wet on wet, and it's just what it sounds like. I'm putting a layer of wet paint down and then immediately following that with another layer of wet paint. And you'll notice that when you use this technique, things kind of blend together organically and can make some really interesting textures, and the colors kind of bleed together. I honestly think wet on wet is my favorite technique in watercolor because that's really the crux of the medium, right? Watercolor is fun because it's unpredictable in its nature. And with wet on wet, you really let that come out and you never quite know what you're going to get. And for this purple patch and this yellow patch, I need to let these dry, but we'll come back to them and have some more fun. In the meantime, I'm going to do another wet on wet patch down in the corner here. And something I should note is that the colors that I'm choosing, while they're bright and vibrant, I'm trying to make sure not to choose colors that are too dark because eventually I'm going to be doodling in these patches. So that's just something to consider when you're making your color selections. Okay, the next basic technique I want to mention is the splatter technique. So I have this magenta patch in the corner and it's still wet, and I'm taking my brush with lots of water and lots of purple paint and then just tapping that over the magenta patch to create that splatter effect. And notice how you get all those little color blooms. It kind of looks like little flowers. I kind of think it's a little too much, so I'm going to lift some of the color. Taking that paper towel and just dabbing it lightly lifts that color. That's another technique. And I'm going to blend it with my brush here. And that gives kind of a cool texture. I like the blended colors, so I'm going to move on. And just going to lay down a few more patches here, some orange and maybe a blue, I think. That sounds good. And again, I'm going to let these dry and we'll come back and have a little more fun. And you don't have to leave everything completely up to chance. You can add, like abstract markings, like I'm doing this kind of abstract swirl. I didn't really like that and I want to doodle in it, so I'm going to blend it out. But do what you like. If this is meant to be an exploration and play. So whatever you think of, go for it. And it looks like our purple patch is dry. So I'm going to do a wet on dry technique here with some blue speckles. And notice how these speckles are keeping their shape. It's because the purple patch is dry, so they're not blossoming like the splatter did on that magenta patch we did before. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want more control over the details, wait for the first layer of paint to dry and then add your additional details with your wet paint. Another great use for the wet on dry technique is to create a translucent effect. So watch what I do with this yellow patch. In the place where it intersects with that dry purple patch, notice how it looks almost see-through. And on the part where it intersects with that orange and magenta patch, which isn't quite dry, by the way, those colors are starting to bleed. So you can kind of see the difference between wet on wet and wet on dry. I think projects or exercises like the one we're doing today are especially good for beginners because it can really help you to understand how watercolor behaves by playing around with some of the different techniques. And these are just basic techniques that I've mentioned today, and that's certainly not all of them. But by playing around and experimenting with them, you can see firsthand the effects they have, and you can incorporate that into other artwork later on. Not to mention that even just playing around with the different techniques, you end up with a beautiful piece of art, and you don't even have to try very hard. You just have to play. Before moving on to the doodling, you're going to want to let your patches dry. Mine have dried, so I'm going to start my doodles. And today I've decided I want to do mushrooms. And of course, mushrooms come in all shapes and sizes. To get ideas for the mushrooms I'm doodling today, I just Googled mushrooms and I found a chart that had all kinds of different mushrooms on it. Basically, anything you think of can be a mushroom. As long as it has a mass at the top and a little tube at the bottom, you're good to go. So I would recommend starting with something basic and make a bell-like shape at the top with a little tube sticking out of the bottom as your basic shape, and then play with shading. Because really it's shading that makes your doodle come to life. And the best tip I ever got about shading was to follow the contour lines. So notice in that first mushroom that I drew, the stem has vertical shading lines because that's how the stem is growing. And then that little lip on the edge, I just followed the contours of the lip. So that lip is kind of an S shape. The shading lines are S shapes. And then the shading lines at the top, like in the bell part of the mushroom, those kind of fan out because the cap of the mushroom fans out. Yeah, so following contours when shading is really helpful, and then just paying attention to where the light is, of course. For example, on that first mushroom that I did, the darkest part is right underneath the cap because that's where the least amount of light is going to be. And all of this is assuming that you want to do really detailed doodles, but you certainly don't have to. You could do some fun line art. You don't have to do mushrooms either. You could do flowers, you can do abstract shapes, you can do cute animal faces, you can do, I'm trying to just rack my brain to put some ideas out there. If you have ideas, please put them in the comments so anyone watching this video can get inspiration from you as well. Yeah, or what's your favorite thing to doodle? I would love to know. Just go on and shout it out. And with that, I'm going to let the music take over while I finish up these mushroom doodles. All right, I like the amount of mushrooms in this piece, so I'm going to switch over and do some abstract doodling. And basically, I'm going to do some scribbles. I think it kind of adds some whimsy to the piece and is honestly really, really fun and cathartic to do, to just scribble on some paper. So, not to reenact a scene from The Ring or anything, but give it a try. I highly recommend it. Okay, the doodles are done. I'm just going to finish off this piece with kind of a sketched out frame here. I think that'll just kind of add to the doodly effect. So I'm not trying to make a line in one single swoop. I'm just kind of scribbling it along the washi tape, and I'm going to do a couple of layers here, just to add to that doodling effect. Okay, and I thought this piece was done, but it was missing something, and last minute I've decided I want to add some scribbly polka dots. I don't know, I'm just feeling it. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for creating with me today. I really appreciate sharing this fun outlet with you. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any thoughts or input, please leave a comment. I absolutely love reading through the comments. Thanks again for stopping by, and until next time, take care.